What are subtle green flags at a job interview that say working here would rock? The interviewer forthrightly describes the best ways to earn raises and receive promotions. This so much. I just started looking to completely change industries. In my first 3 casual interviews, none of them could tell me anything other than we do annual reviews. I'm 50 years old. You Arab gonna have to give me a more realistic view of your corporate ladder, THG Han that. When you come into the office and see people casually talking and laughing about something work related, bonus points if one of them is the interviewer. I'm in the software industry and a lot of companies are kind of sweet shops. I like to schedule people to interview in the afternoons so when their interview ends at 5 o'clock they can see people packing up and going home at the end of their day. During the interview for my current job, I saw people packing up and leaving around 3:30-4. I immediately thought, oh now I really want this job. When the interviewer is genuinely excited about what the company does. I walked into the interview for my current job expecting it to use it as practice for my next interview. I met the CEO at a coffee shop and he was so passionate about the company he got me hooked. I've been doing this almost 3 years now and I've never enjoyed a job more. A great question to ask in interviews is, what do you like about working here? It frequently catches the interviewer off guard and you can learn a ton from their reaction. It's usually pretty easy to tell whether they're being sincere and there's things they enjoy or if the workplace actually sucks. At least one of the people interviewing you will be your direct manager and they seem cool. Also, they've been there for years. Restaurant worker here. The first green flag is when I have confirmed that I will get the hours I need to survive and the boss immediately respects my hour restrictions. If they go, we'll see, that just means you might get 20 hours a week or we'll make you work like a dog until you burn out. When your supervisor randomly walks over and says, "You want a cup of tea, mate?" I've had 2 interviews this week. Not one asked me the stereotypical questions, more so my qualifications, how to handle certain situations. The interviewers today and I went on a sidetrack talking about early 2000s pop punk, dog training and cooking. The main interviewee joked she'd take me in right now. It was a fun interview. All smiles. Laid back but still professional. My first interview wasn't as fun, but relaxed and good communication. He also let me know after questions things like, "That's exactly it. Oh, I like that. That's the answer I'd give." I landed the first one. I feel great about today's pointers. I didn't feel pressured or like I was actually being judged. I don't actually have the job yet, but I'm fixing to start work as an outbound salesman at a staffing agency. Because I'm low on cash, I asked to be staffed as a temp with one of the factories we contract with in the meantime. Can't start for a couple months because of internal politics. Started off great, but lo and behold, working in a factory didn't mesh well with my chronic back pain. I made it a week because I was afraid quitting the factory would jeopardize my job offer from the agency. But it really was getting unbearable. It eventually got too painful. And knowing that quitting on short notice would leave them in a really bad position, they needed to find a new employee to work at the factory before the end of the day. 1 hour later, and asked that they work on finding a replacement for me, but insisted that I stay until they find someone else so as to not cause any problems. Rather than taking me up on my offer, the head of the agency and my future boss insisted that I stop working there immediately, expressed guilt that I had been afraid to call sooner, and stayed an hour late to find me a reassignment and place a new temp at the factory. Needless to say, that really bolstered my faith in the company, and I'm really excited to start working for them. The husky that met me at the reception desk. I walked in, and while shopping the owner seemed impressed by my knowledge on the subject when I identified an old surplus rifle he didn't recognize, and we ended up sing for a few hours. My next visit I was offered a job. Best job I have had in my life. Kinda how I got my current job. Said with the store director for a bit, then asked if he was hiring. When your interviewer says he's about to spend the rest of the day on a team building session at Legoland. When I interviewed after I got laid off, I asked how they handled the pandemic. It shows a lot about the type of company they are and how they view their employees. Coming from a childcare perspective, how much art is on the walls? If there's a lot of art and with plenty of style variation, it shows me the kids are engaging well with the adults and the staff is creating a good environment for them to explore. Same thing with how many books are on the shelves. They don't have a high employee turnover. My future boss correctly pronounced my name when picking me up in the lobby. Her support, mentorship, and care for growth and happiness still are the reason I'm with the company 7 years later. In the last interview of my current job, they were all joking and having a great time with me as well as one another. I could tell they were more interested in how I would fit in with the culture after they figured out I was qualified. They were very candid about the technical struggles of the company itself, but all of them had beaming looks in their eyes when they discussed benefits and other employee interactions. Not going to lie, they didn't lie at all about the systems being trash, but the culture and openness is what is keeping me there. They also pay pretty freaking fat compared to the other companies around me. We all try our best with what we have, and that's what keeps us all going. Since starting, only one person in my immediate office area has left for another company and there have been many new job additions. Good work-life balance, low turnover, their organization is profitable year after year. The application process is pretty normal and respectful of your time, i.e. send your resume and brief cover letter and references. As opposed to those 7-hour personality quizzes, they don't seem too quick to want to hire you on the spot. There's no major demographic difference between non-customer facing and customer facing positions. Like if you go in and everyone you see in the public sales areas is white and everyone in production is Hispanic, that's a little iffy. Look at people's faces. People can bullshit you all day long, but there are often easy to read facial expressions that tell the real story. The beverage they are offering you says something. High payments without the workers looking like overused rags. People look happy. Always check the area where you plan to work. It's easy to spot the red flags with some attention. This is great because I just had an interview a couple days ago that went really well. I showed up a few minutes early before the boss unlocked the doors, and some guy clearly on crack came along and banged on the door, turned around to look at me, and said he's not a nice guy, and then stalked off. I thought it was kind of weird, so I mentioned it to the boss. He said it was most likely the same guy he had chased off with a hammer the previous night. He explained that the guy came in clearly tweaking and was being creepy/threatening to the staff. Obviously the creepy guy isn't the green flag, but the fact that the owner is willing to protect the staff instead of just placating problem customers was a huge plus in my book. Anyway, I start in February. Worked a telemarketing job that allowed people to have a beer on the job. Interviewing folks for a position next week. Saw that someone emailed me a question, I'll respond at 8:30 on Monday, so they see that we don't respond to emails on our phone/over the weekend. That's your time, not company time. I have a few thoughts on this. Break policy. Are breaks based on the needs of the company or the needs of the employee? Salary transparency. Are you going to make as much as someone in the same position who was recently hired? Does the company hide how much people make? Employee retention. A few posts have mentioned you want a company with a balanced turnover rate, but I feel there is a lot to be said if a majority of employees have been with the company for 20+ years or so. For example, literally had an interviewing manager tell me, I don't care if you show up in a bathrobe with a toothbrush hanging out of your mouth. If you can get the job done and your skills are what you say, then we're all good. Also noticed someone with a glass of wine on their desk on my way out. It was Friday afternoon, and this was considered perfectly fine. One of the best jobs I've had. Prompt communication during the scheduling and interview process. They get back to you quickly after each response and seem genuinely interested in talking to you. Nothing worse than someone who takes days to respond, or even just ghosts you halfway through. The interviewer asks you questions and then genuinely cares about your answers. For me, it was when my manager just chatted with me instead of interviewing. I mean, he did interview, but it wasn't formal. It was nice and relaxed, and he wanted to get a sense of who I was in the moment rather than rigid standard questions.